Hi, my name is Tara Martinez, and I will be teaching the beginners chess class. I started playing chess when I was 5 years old. I was raised in tournaments, and I quickly moved to professional chess. What chess has done for me is I've had scholarship opportunities from professional chess, and I have also won a lot of money in different tournaments around the United States. All right, so we'll just jump right in to the history of chess. So the history of chess is actually very interesting, I think. So this board, a long time ago, this is ancient times, this board was actually a map, and the game itself was more of a war plan. This was in ancient India. Now, since then, the game then moved to Europe, and Europeans they fine-tuned the game and the rules of the game, and now it has become a very popular, worldly known game and way to pass the time. It is a hobby for many, and for a lot of people, it is also a job. So I will start with. So I will start first with the pieces. So actually, before I start with that, I want to talk about one thing. So when we approach this board, it may be overwhelming, but we can always take it apart. So one of the things that chess actually helps with a lot is, patience, logic skills, strategy skills, and geometry. So as we can see, it's a giant square. And in the square are 64 little squares, and that's 32 white, 32 black. Now, when we take the pieces into account, it gets a lot more complicated. So we'll start with the king. The king, here I can hold him up. This is the black king. This is the white king. The kings are very crucial to the game of chess. You need the kings to be on the board in order for it to be a game of chess. So we'll set them down in their usual spots. Now the king, he doesn't have a point value. I usually break it down on points. The king is not, he's so important that you can't have a game without him. So I'll go over more of him later because it gets complicated. The next piece I want to go over is the pawn. The pawn, so white pawn. The pawn is worth 1 point. So now we're going to get into the point system. 1 point. So the pawn is the smallest piece. It's the least capable, really. But the cool thing about the pawn is it can become much stronger in the end, and I will go over that a little later. So the next we have the knight. I'll go over the knight. This is the knight, and it might be backwards on your screen. But the knight is worth 3 points. 3 points. So he's kind of in between there. And we have the bishop. Bishop, white bishop. White bishop is also 3 points. We have rook. Rook, kind of like book, but with an R. Rook is worth 5 points. So we're going to find out why. And last, but very much not the least, we have the queen. That is the queen. Now the queen is married to the king, right? They're like mom and pop. And the king and queen, they make a very great team. The queen's job is to defend the king. And the king's job is to not be trapped. So he has a kind of an easy job there because he has the rest of his pieces are there to protect him. All right, now I'm going to set up the rest of the board just so you can see. If you have been around a chessboard before, then you will recognize this. We have a different pawn there, but just from a different set. And we'll set this one up. 2 bishops, a rook, black knight, white knight. Okay, so this is how we set up the board. And maybe I can also get a light. I'm going to go grab a light so you can see it. So maybe that helps a little bit. Okay, we can see. All right, maybe we can put the light right there. Okay, so this is how we start the position. Now, white always goes first just because somebody had to, and I guess they decided that it was going to be the white pieces. But this is the normal setup, and remember, rook, knight, bishop, queen, king, bishop, knight, rook, and then pawn. And then it mirrors, black mirrors it. Okay, now that we have seen how to set up the board, we're going to start going over each piece and how it moves. So I will start first probably with one of the simplest pieces, and that would be the king. And remember, he's our most important piece. He is our most important piece. So we must keep that in mind always when dealing with the king. Okay. All right, so the king. Now the king is actually very simple. He moves 1 square at a time, always, in any direction. So I will use some pawns, backwards pawns I like to use to help illustrate this. So everywhere where I put a backwards piece is a place that he can move. He moves 1 square in any direction. He's very straightforward. This is where the king can go. He always has a little box around him. He cannot jump. He is allowed to move backwards. And if there is an enemy's piece in his way, he can absolutely capture it. So the king is pretty simple. All right, now we're going to go over, and it's the same for the black, by the way. Okay, now we're going to go over the pawn. So the pawn, if you remember how many points he's worth, you can say it in your head and just follow along, and I will tell you at the end. So the pawn, he's kind of similar to the king, except he has 4 exceptions. So this is, follow along with me here. Okay, so the pawn only moves 1 square at a time. Only 1 square at a time. Now, there are 4 exceptions about him, though. Is on the first move, remember, he starts, I should be using the white pawn. He starts here, right? He is allowed to move 2 squares instead of 1 square. So on his first move, before he's made any move, he can move 2 instead of 1. Or he can also move 1. Now after he moves 2, that's it. That's all he got. He has to go back to 1 square at a time. Okay. Second exception is he cannot move backwards. He cannot move side to side. It's he's not able to. He cannot do it. It's just part of the structure of who he is as a character. Now this means how he captures things is also a bit different. So we would think, oh, he can capture. No, he cannot capture what is in front of him. He cannot do it. He's simply going to bump his nose. He's going to bump his nose if he tries to capture it. So how we capture things with a pawn is on the diagonal. And I often have a lot of confusion here with kids But you can always think of it like this. The pawn, he bumps his nose, and he has to reach out his arms to grab things. See how I reach out my arms kind of diagonally? This little guy is reaching out his arms, and I can use a piece of paper, kind of. These are the pawn's arms. And if I was really going to have some fun, I'd draw little hands on them. But these are the pawn's arms. If you can, they look like horns, but they are his hands. And that's kind of a trick I teach to help kids remember. He reaches out his arms to grab the piece. So this is how pawn can capture. Now I'll ask you, can he capture what's right in front of him? If you said yes, it's not true. He cannot capture what is in front of him. He simply will bump his nose. Now the third exception to pawns is, let's say after he moves, and we'll put a pawn for black. We're going to move him. Okay, we take a step, and they just do this for a little while, and then suddenly, oh, what happens now? He got to the other side. He can't move backwards. He can't move side to side. What is he supposed to do? So this is the part where our smallest piece can become one of the most powerful pieces. And I forgot to mention this earlier, but queen is worth 9 points. So queen is the most valuable, most strongest. Queen is the strongest piece. So this little pawn that was worth 1, our little baby pawn, when he marches his way to the other side, 1 step at a time, he can become the most powerful piece. And this is, this is where chess gets interesting, because we often think that when there are less pieces, that the game is over, when in fact, if you have a pawn on the board, it can go for a very long time, because when you have a queen, you have a lot more possibilities. So that's the third exception. The fourth exception is a little more complicated, but it's a special rule, and I will just show it to you. But you don't have to take any note from this, because it's something you'll learn more in advanced classes. This is called en passant. En passant in French means in passing. So this was a rule that someone who's French came up with, because he got mad when he said, my pawn is waiting for your pawn to move here so I can capture it, right? Now, we have the 2-move rule though. So when pawn skipped or passed the square, the rule developed that you can still capture it. So this is a very complicated rule, and I often have chess students doing weird positions and illegal moves that don't make sense, and they're going, oh no, it's en passant, and I have to say that's not en passant. So just to give you a quick introduction of what en passant is, you heard it here first, okay? So next piece, not as complicated as the pawn, pretty straightforward, is Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop is 3 points. And what he does is he moves diagonally. He moves through squares. If you know what diagonally means, think of the square, right? The square. And it's whatever moves corner to corner, diagonally. So this bishop cuts through the corners, and this is how he moves. Now, because of this, there are some things with him too, like he will never be able to go on a white square if he started on a black square. It's impossible, right? And let's say his other bishop starts on a white square. He can never go on a black square. So they're opposites in this way. Now, one thing is, though, that bishops, they move straight. So if he moves here, that's his move. He cannot turn corners diagonal corners, that is, and he cannot jump. But he can move anywhere on the diagonal as long as nothing is blocking him. Okay, next we're going to go over rook. Rook, 5 points. 5 points. So rook is opposite of bishop. Rook does not go through corners. He does not cut through corners. He goes up and down rows and files. These are files, these are rows. So the rook goes down the file and he can go across the rows. Now, one thing with him that's similar with bishop is that he cannot turn corners and he cannot jump over other pieces. So if there is something blocking him, he would have to stop, right? Now, this means that he can, if he makes a move here, he has to wait till the next turn before he can turn. Or let me phrase that better. He has to wait the next turn. If he wants to go to this square, H3, it will take him 2 moves. 1 move, 2 moves. You can count on your fingers with me. 1, 2. So that's 2 moves away. All right, next we are going to do the queen. Queen, 9 points. Queen is 9 points. Very powerful. So the queen is actually a mix of the rook and the bishop. So that means that the queen can move diagonal, she can move diagonal, and she can move straight and up. Same thing though, she cannot turn corners, she cannot jump over pieces. So if she's blocked, she either has to capture the piece or she has to move to another square. So queen is pretty straightforward. And next we have, this one is probably another tricky one. It's Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight is worth 3 points. And we're going to see how he moves right now. So can everyone make an L shape with their hand? L shape. L, like la, 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 la. So L, that's how he moves. So he moves 3 squares, 1, 2, 3, in the shape of an L. So I will start marking off how many squares he moves. And if you're at home and you have a chessboard, please make sure to set it up. Get your parents to help you set it up so that you can follow along with me on these exercises. Okay, so we're going to find the first square that the knight can move. Find our L, that's the first step, because he does turn corners. So 1, 2, 3. That's a square. So we have to mark it. I'm going to mark it with this. Oh, you can't see that. Okay. I'm going to mark it with a Post-it card. Maybe I can even put X's on these. Okay, so that's 1 square that he can move to. All right, now let's find the L again. And remember, it can be a backwards L, a sideways L. As long as it is an L, he can move there. So let's try this one. 1, 2, 3. Yep, it works. It fits. Grab another Post-it. So that's 2 squares he can move to. Okay. Sideways L. 1, 2, 3. That's another one. And make sure you can use pennies, you can use paper, but make sure to mark off every square that we go along with. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's try this way. Oh, yep, it fits. 1, 2, 3. Yep, another Post-it down. Okay, how about downwards up? 1, 2, 3. Yep. Basic L, right? It works. Let's check it. 1, 2, 3. Yep. You can move there. Backwards L. 1, 2, 3. Yep, we're in the clear. Can move that right there. We're missing one more. This one is hard for me, but it's backwards and upside down. 1, 2, 3. Good. It all checks out. Okay, now what does this shape look like to you? Circle. It's a circle. Yes, very good. So this is kind of where geometry comes in, because let's say we had pieces scattered all through this, you would still need to see this circle in your head, even if it's not there. We have these here right now, but if I were to take them away, would you still see the circle? Let's see. I'm going to take them all away. Can you still see the circle? If you can, then that's a very good thing, and you should practice that more if you cannot see it. So this will make it so much easier to move this piece, because in complicated positions, it might be overwhelming for us to try and find where he can move. But if you keep that circle in mind, then it can be broken down very quickly. All right, so we went over all the pieces, and I gave a brief history. I'm very glad that I was able to teach you today on how the pieces move and about how to set up the board. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And